Okay, good morning. I want to just do a couple of housekeeping things here. First, if you need, we do have captioning as well as an interpreter. You are welcome to pin the interpreter. However, the interpreter will be spotlighted throughout the presentation. And if you have any issues with that, please let us know. We will have a question and answer segment. And if you have questions, however, throughout the presentation, please feel free to ask. And I want to just get started here. So good morning, welcome, thank you for coming. My name is Deanne Lautenbach. I'm excited that so many of you joined us today. This is our second day of DeafBlind Awareness Week, our webinars, and I do hope that you join us through the rest of the week as well. Today, we're going to be talking about deaf-blind communication, and I'm going to just first introduce myself a little bit more, and I'm going to also, excuse me a second, I'm doing a little bit to the screen here to see if this is working. I think I just want to make sure, that's what I was afraid of. We removed our interpreter from the spotlight, so I don't want to do that. I'm going to remove myself from it. Really quickly, I am Deanne Lautenbach. Good morning and welcome. And like I said, this presentation is on communication methods used by deaf-blind individuals. And I'm going to give you a little background about myself. I did start out as an educational and freelance interpreter, sign language interpreter, and I worked for over 15 years doing both freelance and educational interpreting. And then went on to get a post-baccalaureate degree in teaching and taught in the public schools for several years. After that, came to the center, and here I had to learn a whole new set of skills because I did understand deaf culture and I did understand sign language, but I did not have any idea how to work with an individual who had a dual sensory loss. And that is a very important thing to know, because I thought when I came here knowing deafness was half of the battle and all I had to learn was about blindness. That was very incorrect on my part. So when I came here, of course, we were required to do continuing education. I have had the opportunity to go to HKNC, Helen Keller National Center in Port Washington, New York, and have had several trainings through them. One of which was adaptive technology, and the other was in haptics training, which we will talk a little bit more later. I've continued on. I've also got Braille training and a teaching certificate, and took my training through Hadley in Illinois. Currently, I am in the Protactile deaf-blind interpreting training program through Seattle, Washington, through DBI, which is Deaf-Blind Interpreting Institute. And it has been an awesome experience. And like I said, my training throughout the years I've been here, which are 14 short years, throughout those years, our education is ongoing. And I feel that I'm going to be showing you and talking a little bit about communication today and the methods we use. And we do take communication very seriously here and make sure that we are meeting all of the needs of our consumers. All right, and from there, we're going to start with communication mode. And how does a person who is deafblind communicate? And communication modes can vary from speech to tactile sign language, and it can include written communication. I'm sure most of you, when you think of deafblind communication, might first think of Helen Keller, as many of us do or did growing up. And she was a wonderful woman, a real trailblazer. But since her time, communication with deaf-blind individuals has really changed and progressed. And I think one of the things that I believe a lot is that the best mode of communication is the one when communication happens. And that means that this isn't a cookie cutter system. We don't just say, okay, I'm going to teach you this way. You fit under this group. I'm going to teach you this way. I'm going to teach you how to communicate this way. So as we go on today, you're going to find that I'm going to talk about several different modes of communication, and I hope that you do take something away from this. So moving on, a person who is deafblind can be hard of hearing with low vision, blind and hard of hearing, deaf with low vision, and deaf and blind. And like I just said, these are groups, and I chose to do this presentation in this order because when we at the center work with individuals who have vision and hearing loss, we are told a little bit about their background, and then we build what we think we can start with as far as our assessment will go, and what we possibly know about that that hearing and vision loss. So like I said, these groups are here. That it is not hard and fast. This is not set in stone at all. We just move forward from that. And I want to go through each of these, talk about the type of communication that each group would possibly use. So we're starting with hard of hearing with low vision. Individuals who are hard of hearing with low vision can, most often their vision and hearing loss is age-related. The individual has speech, and the individual has usable vision. Communication options, and this is obvious, speech, written language, and print on palm. Speech. When we're talking about an individual who has low vision and is hard of hearing, they are going to be able to speak for themselves. And yes, they are deafblind. They do use listening devices, or I shouldn't say that they do use listening devices. Quite often, a listening device is required, and it's helpful to aid the communication between the consumer and whoever they're speaking with. And what I have pictured here are two different types of listening devices. On the top, the listening device that you see up there is an FM system. And the FM system is, if you can see it right here, the FM system is a system where the speaker has the transmitter, and the individual who needs the listening device has their own receiver. So it's very direct. There's no other noises that they might pick up in the background. This is a very nice system, and it also has a very high price point. When you're out in the community, you might be at a theater or in church or at any various places, and there are loop systems, and often they run off of the same form of technology. Below that is the pocket talker, and this listening device definitely has a lower price point. There aren't two separate parts, the receiver and transmitter. This is just a receiver, and if you see right here, there's a microphone on it, and it comes with headphones or a loop. And then there is a long cord that connects this. So you can actually either hold it in your hand and reach out to the individual that you're communicating with to be able to hear them. Or you hand them the pocket talker and they speak into that. So it works great if you're going to an appointment, or if you're, you know, with someone one-on-one in a quiet restaurant, but it's not perfect. However, the price point is good, and it is a tool that is very acceptable when we're talking about communication. All right, I'm going to move on to the next slide here. Excuse me a second. All right, hold on. I'm, of course, having a little issue. All right, written communication also is another form of communication with low vision, hard of hearing individuals. At this point in time, the individual probably can read large print with or without magnification. They might also be able to use wide-lined paper and or a whiteboard. And I just want to take a second and talk about the wide-lined paper. This is a nice tool to have, especially if you have individuals who have macular degeneration. Quite often their vision makes words float, and having that wide line assists them in trying to guide and to follow a line while reading. As far as the whiteboard and marker go, that is a tool that I can promise you all of the staff here at the center have. It's a great tool to have to write a quick message like, "Hi, my name is," or asking questions. You're able to write this in very large print, show it to the individual you're working with that asks the question, they can respond back to you in speech. All right. And finally, print on palm. And the reason I gave this its own page is because this is a tool that I think anybody should have and should know. If you have consumers who have vision and hearing loss and they know print alphabet, this is a great tool to have. And when you're doing print on palm, you are doing the letters as you see them on the screen right now. They're all capital letters except for the letter I. You do add the dot at the top. And how it works is that if you were to put your palm out in front of you and you take your pointer finger, you're going to write, let's say the word hi. I'm going to do the letter H on my palm. So I'm going to go down, down, and across. And then right over where I wrote the H, I'm going to make the letter I. I don't move across my palm. I stay letter on top of letter on top of letter. When I want to move to the next word, I pause. I don't touch the hand. And then I go in and start writing my next word. This goes on. It's a very simple tool to have, and it works great with individuals, like I said, who do know print alphabet. One example that I can think of is a consumer that we've had here in the past. That individual learned print on palm, and I will talk a little bit more on why he learned print on palm, but he learned print on palm and found that when he was out in the community and it was noisy, this was a great communication tool for him. So definitely something for you to keep and to have it in the back of your mind that to have this tool with you. I think it's a very good thing for all of us to have. All right. Moving on now to blind and hard of hearing individuals. When we're talking about individuals who are blind and hard of hearing, we're talking about individuals who might have age-related hearing loss. The individuals should have or does have speech. The individual is blind, legally blind, or no usable vision. And they may or may not be a Braille user. So what communication can we use with these individuals? Here we're talking about speech. Again, the individual can speak for him or herself. Braille is an option and print on palm is possible. And I will talk about why that's possible. Speech. Again, we've already addressed these two. We're talking about the Pocket Talker and the FM system. And if the individual is hard of hearing, having these tools to use with them, it's going to make communication for that individual much better when the sound is amplified for them. Braille communication. I want to take a second here because as individuals, as we go through time, technology and everything, communication changes. And one of the changes that is being seen now is that Braille is not being used as much as it was, let's say even 15 years ago. So kids going up through school now might not be learning to use Braille. There are other types of technology for them. There's audio books. Everything for them is in audio. And so they don't find the need to use Braille. That can be concerning as they get older, because then we're looking at issues on how do we work with them and communication. But if they are Braille users, we do have different ways that we can communicate, definitely through document. If I need to send an invitation to somebody, I'm obviously going to emboss their invitation for them if they are a Braille reader. As you can see, there is a blue keyboard here, and that, if you look right here, this is a Braille display. That is a great tool for those who are Braille users, and right next to it is an iPhone. So technology has really made communication it's really impacted it very positively. So with this, the iPhone is paired with the Braille display or vice versa, and you're able to read everything on your phone, from your text to your emails. You're able to move around, you're able to send documents. It's a great tool, great technology that deaf, blind individuals do have the opportunity to use. And the other is the notes. In my car, I currently have this great tool. This is a slate, the yellow slate here, and a stylus. And I also have a pack of note cards in my car. And I do have a consumer that I work with who is very low tech, and we're talking slate and stylus low tech. And if there's a change in our plans, or if I want to make an appointment to meet with this consumer, I take out my slate and stylus and I quick send off a note and put it in the door or their mailbox so that they're able to get that communication from me. And finally, going back to the Braille display in the phone, another great tool with that is one-on-one communication, when you are able to connect a keyboard and use it with the Braille display. We have a consumer that we worked with in the past. I haven't, one of my coworkers had. And this consumer had immediately lost the use of his hearing and became deaf, and it was immediate and was lost. The only thing that he had was his Braille display, and didn't know any other technology, didn't know the iPhone or anything like that, but did have a Braille display. My coworker got in there and was able to get him connected so that she could, using a keyboard, communicate with him. And for him at that moment, it was so rewarding for him and exciting for him that I'm sure it was just as rewarding for my coworkers. So I thank her for sharing that with us. And it's great. Like I said, technology has really made the deaf blind communities a smaller world, because now we're able to connect with people that we weren't in the past. All right, moving on from there. Deaf with low vision is the next group that I want to talk about. And often these individuals have a vision loss due to a genetic disorder. It can occasionally be age-related. Most of these individuals use American Sign Language. And at this time, the individual has usable vision. The communication options that we have here are American Sign Language. And I'm also putting on here that they might use large print and print on palm. And what I would like to point out here is that not all individuals who are deaf, low vision, use sign language. We have deaf individuals who were raised in an oral program and never learned to use sign language, never learned to use American Sign Language. So we have to figure out what tools that we can use with them. And in this case, because our consumers have usable vision, we're able to use print and print on palm. But one thing that I really want to make clear, and I think this is important for those of you who might work with deaf, low vision, deaf-blind individuals who use sign language, it is important to always make sure that when you are communicating with them, that you don't resort to pencil and paper, that you make sure you have the right type of communication set up. And that means that you have an interpreter when you have a meeting, and make sure that you're able to communicate with them appropriately. Yes, there are times in occasions where emergencies do pop up and written communication might be the only mode of communication that you have, but it needs to be very brief, and you need to make sure that you have an interpreter brought in and you're getting the correct form of communication to that individual. So with that being said, I want to move on just a little bit here, and we're going to talk about, now we've transitioned to an individual who is deaf and low vision. When they go through transitions as the vision loss progresses. What you see here in the picture are two individuals, and we're going to say the one that is signing is the interpreter. And there's a second individual that you see just the hand resting on the wrist of the interpreter. And what is happening here is what we call tracking. And that deaf-blind consumer is actually making sure that they keep the interpreter's signs in their visual field. So they're managing the visual field of the interpreter, or for themselves, I should say. They're managing their visual field by moving the interpreter into their visual field. So that's tracking. At this point in time, they are able to see. There is some visual field for them, and they are managing it as they can. In this next slide, we have here either, well, in this situation, close proximity interpreting. This is an interpreter, but we also, as signing individuals and staff here at the center, do use close proximity. And what I mean by close proximity is, if you see this picture, the woman on the left is the individual who has the vision loss. And the woman on the right is the interpreter. And they are almost knee to knee here. That is not typical spacing with an interpreter. We do allow the interpreters to have some room, but in this situation, they are very close. This is close proximity interpreting. And we also, like I said, do use this where we are as close as the individual who has low vision has put us. They actually tell the interpreter or the instructor, in my case, I need you to sit here, and I'll sit where I'm at. So I allow my consumers to place me, and we move around so that they're able to, again, get me into their visual field. And as you can see, this person is close. Now, when we're talking distance, proximity, we're distance. I've worked as an interpreter, and I've had to sit possibly 10 feet away from my consumer. And the reason is that they probably have retinitis pigmentosa, and you might know it as tunnel vision. And with that, their visual field, their perception, their field of vision is very narrowed. To give you an idea, if you were to look through a straw and watch the interpreter on the screen, you would have to move that straw, and it would be a very small sign space. So if you're looking at her through a straw, you're going to have to move back to be able to see her face as well as her signs. So that's just to give you an idea. And today, maybe when you have time, take the straw, look through it, and just that'll give you some idea of what retinitis pigmentosa is. All right, I'm going to move on to deaf and blind individuals. And when we're talking about these individuals, often their vision loss is due to a genetic disorder. And the genetic disorder is Usher syndrome. Most often it is Usher syndrome. And with that, retinitis pigmentosa is the vision loss that is part of the genetic disorder of Usher syndrome. It is rarely an age-related loss. At this point in time, there are occasions where we do have individuals who do lose their hearing suddenly, but more often it is because of the genetic disorder. These individuals use American Sign Language for the most part. There are the occasion where we have individuals who do lose their hearing and we don't have American Sign Language to fall back to. The individual doesn't understand speech and has no usable vision. So communication, again, we're just taking a little bit more away and away and away. And our options now, they're becoming a little bit different. Tactile sign language, that is obvious. Haptics communication, protactile or PT-ASL, or a combination of any of the above. I want to talk a little bit about tactile sign language. We talked a little bit at the very beginning about Helen Keller and her being a trailblazer, and Anne Sullivan and tactile communication. Well, that's been several years ago, and we are still using tactile communication or tactile sign language. It is a common means of communicating with individuals who are deafblind. In this picture that you see there, the interpreter is signing, and the individual who is deafblind, she has her hands gently resting on the interpreter's hands, and that is what is tactile ASL or tactile sign language. And she's not seeing what is being signed. The downfall with tactile communication is that there's no facial expression. The interpreter has to add that facial expression through sign language. There's a lot of that incidental information has just gone. She doesn't, necessarily know what the speaker's emotion is unless she's able to follow the sign. And some of the information does get lost when communication is done this way. So, as I said, tactile sign language is how we started, but like everything else, communication develops and evolves. And the next two modes of communication that I'm going to talk to you about, one of which is haptic communication. Just to start off, haptic in Greek means touch. And haptic communication allows the individual who is deafblind to receive incidental information, environmental information, contextual information, and they're getting it through touch on the body. And I just want to take a minute here to look at this picture. As you can see, and I'm going to take my pointer here, this person that I am circling here is the individual who is deafblind. And the woman to her left is an interpreter, and they are using tactile interpretation. As you can see, she is using tactile interpretation. And behind the deafblind woman is this gentleman, and he has his hand on the deafblind woman's back, and he as well is giving her information. I cannot see what the interpreter is signing, but I can see that he is telling her that someone at the front of the room is either sitting down or there is a chair there. So actually, I think it's that there's a chair there and that there might be someone moving to that chair. So it's a picture. I can't get much more from that, but I want you to be aware that, like I said, communication has developed so greatly that we are seeing this now. And this woman's getting more than just the meeting conversation. She's getting, you know, there are people moving around the room, or the speaker just stood up, or the speaker is moving toward us, or people are laughing, or people are crying. She's getting that information on her back. So with haptic communication, let me just point out, because there is a little difference here. Haptic communication, we are looking at the communication happens mostly on the back or on the upper arm, on the shoulders. On occasion, it can be on the thigh if we're just doing some back channeling or getting some communication back and forth in a yes/no answer. This is a form of communication that was developed by hearing individuals in Norway, and it was for a deaf-blind woman so that they were able to give her more environmental information. So that's haptic communication. The next one that I'm talking about is protactile communication, or PTASL. Now, this communication requires four hands, contact with each other at all times. And this is a picture. This is a very simple, simplistic picture just to give you an idea. This language also gives more contextual or more environmental, more give and take in communication. And how that is, and I'm going to explain it a little bit, is when we're doing tactile ASL, it's the interpreter giving information and the individual who's deafblind receiving that information through touch. There isn't any question, well, there could be questions asked, but there is no give and take. The interpreter is giving that information as they go. They're doing their job, but what we're looking for is just a little bit more in this. And so this communication, as they are working together, is, if in the situation of the picture here, I'm going to just explain this a little bit. We see two women, and the individual on your left, she is the one who is communicating at this point in time. And she is the expressive, she's expressing or giving information. And this is the receiver. This woman on the right is the receiver. And again, from this picture, I'm going to give you a brief, this is what I see interpretation. The woman on the left is obviously telling her something. you can see that the woman on the right has her hand up in the shape of the sign for tree. And the woman on the left is telling her that something is going up or coming down from that tree. And she's following this with her own hand, the receiver. She's able to follow this story. It's using her hand, and she understands the tree. So she has a concept of what this tree is and how this animal is moving up or down her arm, which she knows is the tree. So it's adding another level or another layer of communication. Now, one other thing that happens with this is that, like I said before, when the interpreter is interpreting, they're giving information. With protactile, and it can be used with an interpreter, the communication has what we'll simply call back channeling, which means that the receiver has his or her hand on the thigh or forearm of the individual who's signing with them and giving immediate feedback like you or I would do. Right now, you're probably sitting in your offices, nodding your head or, shaking your head at me going, no. But that's what the beauty with protactile is, that the receiver can give immediate feedback. Hey, yeah, I get that. Or no, or I have a question. Things like that. So it's really a great mode of communication. That and haptics both use forms of that. And I think, like I said, the language is developing. Wrapping this one up, this is a language that has been developed by deaf-blind individuals. As a community, they have gotten together, they've developed this language. This is theirs. It's a culture for deaf-blind individuals. They have their own philosophy. And it's something that they're very proud of. And very much like but very much like there is a deaf culture, there is also a deaf-blind culture, and that culture uses protactile communication. So that was a very quick overview of this, and I hope I did both of those forms of communication justice. Moving on, and I know this was not on our list, is congenitally deaf-blind. Those individuals are usually born with multiple disabilities and often are not, they aren't, when they're identified, deafness and blindness are usually an afterthought. There are other issues that come into play. And so the language and the language development usually falls to the wayside a bit. We are unsure. Vision and hearing always varies. The vision and hearing losses always vary from person to person, as it would be with anyone else. So communication options, again, those vary. Now there are interveners. And an intervener is an individual who works with a deaf-blind child who's deaf-blind at a very early age. They're getting in, they're immersing them, they're getting language to this child at a very young age and making sure that they're getting the incidental information, and they're making sure that everything is hands-on, and they're getting the explanation, and the conversations are being fed to them as well. So interveners are a great newer tool that's out there for individuals who are deafblind. Clearly, their worlds are tactile. They, if they can, will learn sign language. There are communication boards and other adaptive technology available that way. Identifying markers. Now you're gonna go, what's an identifying marker? Here at the center, if you ever get an opportunity to visit at our doors, and I can pretty much tell you which door has what, there is by the latch, by the door, a strip, a rectangular strip of textured material. So for instance, at one door, it's a like sandpaper texture. At another door, it might be really bumpy, ridgy, textured. It's strip and it's right on the door frame. And that is an identifying marker. And one of our consumers that comes to the center, when we sign to her, if I say, hey, let's meet in the leisure room, she gets that sign and she knows that, oh, I go to this room. She feels the identifying marker and goes into that room. Whether she thinks of it the way that I just explained it or not, it doesn't matter. She has put my hand gestures, connected them to the door identification marker. And finally, tactile calendar systems. I have used these, and you might say, well, that's not communication, but it really is. With my work with individuals who are deafblind, I have learned, and actually we all have, that deafblind individuals need structure. They need to know what's happening from moment to moment or day to day. They have so much downtime and time where they're not in contact or communication with anybody, that having this calendar system gives them something to look forward to. So they have that and they know that, oh, hey, today I'm not going to just sit. I'm going to go to leisure class. I'm going to go to cooking class. I'm going to get to go out for a walk. And those calendar systems are there to give them, like I said, something to look forward to. And it also gives them structure, because if you take that structure away, when they are, when you take that structure away, that can make for a very unhappy individual. Others, I couldn't think of a better title. I really couldn't. And I know we had the 4 groups up above, but others, this one I thought was very important. The groups that we talked about above, those were only a broad overview. There are so many situations when those groupings and those modes of communication just don't work. And we need to make sure that the individuals we are working with, we are matching their needs. We are finding the best mode of communication for them. And not just maybe one mode, but several modes. Trust me, there have been times where we have worked with individuals and we think this will work for them. And we work on that mode of communication, let's say 3 months, 6 months, 6 months, 6 months down the road, suddenly we're like, nope, that's not working. Back to the drawing board. We look at what we planned, we looked at how we assessed originally, and we rethink it. So it's not wasted time. It's learning and making sure that that individual is getting what works for them. We thought that would work. We find that this individual maybe doesn't have the skill set to be able to learn that mode of communication. So that being said, I want to show you 2 examples of individuals. And I just want to take a minute right now to say that for me, this was really hard to put some examples down. And I did give some thought to an individual that I've worked with who was deaf, an ASL user, and how we might have struggled to match their communication. I guess what I have to say is that with deaf-blind individuals who are deaf first and became deaf-blind, they already have a mode of communication that will adapt itself as their vision loss progresses. So they already have a language in place with American Sign Language. And what they need if their vision declines is to change from being able to use ASL to tracking to then a form of tactile communication. So the examples I have are of individuals who are blind and hard of hearing, but I thought it was important to share with you that really I did think about individuals who are deaf-blind, but I do think that they do have a wonderful mode of communication and it is adaptable. So moving forward, I want to talk about Andrea. Andrea is blind and hard of hearing. Andrea speaks and is a Braille user. And when her hearing aids are out, whether it's before bedtime or other activities like swimming or whatever, she has no communication. Hearing aids are out, she's not able to hear anything. What does she do? She panics. She panics. Anything happens, she panics. And when I say panics, she yells, she just sort of loses it, and it's not necessarily a good situation, and it causes for a bigger meltdown. So that needed to change. And our solution for that was, this individual is not an ASL user. She's not a sign language user. And what we did do, however, was teach her a set of signs and gestures to be able to communicate in those moments. Very simple things like she needs to take that information in receptively, meaning she needs to know that there's someone there and they're communicating with her. Expressively, she has no problem. She can yell. She can tell us what the problem is, but she needs to be calmed and not panicked. So she needs some form of sign language. And we taught her a set of signs to help. And it really has reduced some of that panic. All right, and then the last example I have here is Pat. Pat is blind and hard of hearing. Pat struggles with speech. It's sometimes you're not able to understand it. She has significant motor disabilities. Physically, she's unable to sign. Pat struggles to communicate with the staff, with family, with anyone, and becomes easily frustrated because the individual's needs aren't being met. The communication is, it's falling apart. So Pat needs to learn some form of tactile communication to ease frustration. The solution that we came up with, and just so you're aware, more often than not, Pat is wheelchair bound. Pat spends most of the day in a wheelchair. And the solution we came up with was a combination of tactile communications, haptics, and protactile to allow signs and gestures to be used on the body for receptive communication. And through what I mean by that is, because Pat sits in a wheelchair, we weren't able to communicate on the back or the shoulders. We had to come to the chest and to communicate on Pat's chest, on the arms, on the legs. And Pat is not a sign language user and did not learn sign language, so this was new. And what we did in this situation was section off parts of her body. So the left arm was anything related to food and to eating. The right arm was anything related to daily activities or leisure activities, and so on. But this worked, and I, again, am glad to know and do keep up with this individual. Glad to know that it was successful. It has reduced the amount of frustration for both Pat and the staff that work with Pat. Quickly, last slide here, and then I'm almost done, and I apologize. I am running a little bit over here. Technology. I think this is important, and you guys are like, wait, you just talked about communication, but this is so important. And I think you have seen this through the throughout the presentation. Technology, like I said earlier, has really made the world smaller for deafblind individuals. When I first started working at the center 14 years ago, our computer room was desktop computers, and there was a Braille display that was the size of a shoebox, or maybe not quite that big, in front of a keyboard. And that was all the technology there was in the way of Braille. As far as individuals were deaf, there was large print, TTYs, which is a telephone typewriter. For those of you who don't know, it's a phone that was used a long time ago for individuals who were deaf. They would type on this keyboard, and that was how they would communicate back and forth. But that it was so limited, and now technology has just skyrocketed. I believe that technology has improved exponentially, and some of the devices that are being used now by all individuals well, not all of our individuals, but with most of our individuals, the cell phone. I hate to sell Apple, but iPhones really have really brought up the game as far as technology. iPhones, iPads, all of those can be connected with a Braille display, as you saw in an earlier picture. Computers now, Braille displays are even different sizes. We look at it, the picture you saw was what we call a 40 cell. They have 14 cell, they have 80 cell. There's such a variety of Braille displays and such an immense growth in technology and phones. And I found it for some of my consumers, there was no phone, especially if they were deaf, blind. Video phones are so important because they're able to see, but if you can't see, there's no way to communicate. And now they're bringing out captioning for video phones so that you're able to read the captions with your Braille display and communicate with individuals on a video phone. And there's also caption phones with large print. So on that, I'm going to wrap that part up, and I want to bring this to questions, and I do want to thank everybody for your patience and going through this with me. And I hope that everybody here is going to be able to take away something from this, because I think it's important that communication for any deafblind individual is very important and really needs to be looked at, and to make sure that we're meeting the needs of every individual. With that being said, are there any questions? I don't think I'm seeing any, which is okay. I'm good with that. I'm going to put my contact information up here for you, because if you do have questions and you do want to reach me or anyone else, please do feel free to. We do have a Facebook page, which is Center for Deafblind Persons. I don't have that contact information up here, but we also have a web page. Please check that out as well. If you do need help or want resources or need a reference or referral, whatever, please feel free to call us. The center's number is 414-481-7477. So, all right, if there aren't any questions, which I don't, oops, I do see one popping up here. Oh, all right, from one of our attendees, it says, how have our services been delivered during COVID masking restrictions? Great question. Being deafblind does not work well with 6 foot social distancing. At the beginning, when a year ago, when we were shut down, we had to work from home, and a lot of our consumers were not being seen, and it was a very difficult time, I am sure, for our consumers as well as it was for us. However, I would say that about, last year, even into the summer, we were already trying to see consumers. We were doing it safely, using masks, face shields. We were using hand sanitizer. It's tactile. We had to be with our individuals, and we were out there working with them. I would say probably we were shut down in March, and I believe by April we were already able to go back out and to see a very small group of those people. What I will say is there are a lot of individuals who were in nursing homes and group homes, any of those services, we were not able to see them. And up until recently have not been able to see them. What we have done most recently as of the beginning of this year was we started doing a virtual leisure class. So we would set up make kits and we would send those kits out to individuals who asked. And mind you, these individuals are deafblind. They have to have the dual sensory loss. And what we would do was we would set up a virtual Zoom meeting and we would send out these kits a couple weeks ahead of time, and we would start up the Zoom meeting, we'd do the activity, and it's been awesome because it's been an opportunity for so many of these people to get together and to talk. Myself and the other instructors, we would just start the meeting, do the activity, and let them take over. And it's been beautiful. So I hope that answered your question. It has been difficult, not just for me, not just my coworkers, but definitely for individuals who are deafblind. It's been very difficult. And I've been concerned about some of them, but we seem to be reaching out to most of them now. All right. Any other questions? Otherwise, I am going to say goodbye to you and thank you all for coming. And if you are going to be in our afternoon, we are going to be doing another webinar on caption phones and caption telephones and apps. And I want to make sure that you're able to join us then at 1 o'clock. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us today. Bye.